this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to do a deep dive into Incubi. First, we're going to talk about unit options and loadouts. That'll be very brief. Then we're going to talk about with or without Drazhar. Then we're going to talk about how I run them and how I like to use them. And before we dig in, I just want to give a shout out to everybody. I do have affiliate links now that we're working with. And the first we're going to talk about is Army Paint or Speed Paints. I don't have any kind of video commercial set up for it yet. And before I do set one up, I just want to let everybody know I do actively use them. They work a lot like GW Contrast Paints and other companies. I have found certain colors for Army Painter to be better than GW Contrast. I've found certain contrast paints to be better than Army Painter Speed Paints. But right now, what I'd like to tell you is, hey, I do like the white and I do like the black a lot. Those are the two I use the most. And if you also use Army Painter Speed Paints, there's an affiliate link in the description. Click on that, use that link to purchase them. It won't cost you any extra money, and then I just get a commission. I'd appreciate it. That's all I'm going to say on it. I'll do my best to keep any kind of paid advertisement very short so that we can focus on the content. Thank you. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the data sheet for the Incubi. They move 7 inches. They're T3 with a 3-up save. They have one of the best saves in our index. They have 1 wound except for the sergeant who has 2. They have a leadership of 6 and an OC of 1. So they're not there to hold objectives, though they can if you put them there. They're there to chop, right? They come equipped with the Clave. That's the normal guy. They are strength 4, -2, 2 damage with 3 attacks. The sergeant gets the same profile, but he also gets a sweep, which is going to be 6 attacks at strength 4, -1, 1 damage, and it's twin length. So the sergeant by himself is going to do a pretty good job of clearing out enemy models, especially other infantry that are single wound or anything that reduces damage. Other than that, I would probably just use the single blade attack most of the time. They have a special rule at the start of the fight phase. Each enemy unit within engagement range makes a battle shock test. We'll dig into that later. And then they have a 5-up invulnerable save. And honestly, the invulnerable save is what I forget about the most. I always just roll it as a 6-up invuln, and that's just because of me. Unit size and cost, you can take the Sergeant plus 4 Incubi for 85 points or Sergeant plus 9 for 170. Very straightforward. It's not a terrible price for what they do, but there are better uses for those points for a lot of players. I know a lot of players, and even like you guys as a community have said, hey man, just run Cabalites. And I know this. I'm telling you right now, I know this. I don't run Incubi because I think they're the best or because I think they're broken. I run Incubi because I want to play in the fight phase. You know, and I said in the comments, if I wanted to play a shooting army, I'd play Votan or I'd play Tau. And I forget who it was, but somebody had jokingly said, hey, man, we shoot better than both of those armies right now. And you're 100% right. I was just making a point that, like, I don't play this army for the guns. I play it because I like witches and I like Incubi and I like Rax. And that's just the phase that I prefer to interact in. I understand that right now in 10th, shooting is intrinsically better. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we can still play melee and still be competitive. Forcing a battle shock test in the fight phase is okay, but it's not great. Battle shock is still pretty weird. It's a much improved interaction over 8th and 9th edition, but I still feel like it needs some kind of tweaks. Again, I like that we're showing improvement from edition to edition, so I'm not complaining at all. Nothing pissed me off more than picking up my models to a bad leadership role, right? There were plenty of times where I would lose 1 Copta, roll a 6 on leadership, and then to combat attrition, lose another 2 Coptas to combat attrition, and then I've just lost 150 points to 1 bad roll. So this is a much cleaner, much better interaction. There's just too many dice rolls for it to be good. Like, it's better, but it's not good. Drazhar or not, at 105 points, I think Drazhar adds a lot of efficiency to Incubi, and I think if you're taking Incubi from a competitive sense, you're taking Drazhar. He just makes them so much better. And I personally prefer a 10 model brick with Drazhar. I don't think competitively, like I said, the Incubi are worth it without him. Without Drazhar, Incubi are great at killing Marines, but that's really kind of where it ends. You know, orcs, anything with a feel no pain and 1 wound, they're going to be fine on. But at T5, orcs are a little bit rough just because I'm wounding them on 5s. And witches are just more efficient into those T3 models like other elves because they have higher volumes of dice and they're just 1 damage. However, once you add Drazhar to the unit, he gets much better at killing and damaging higher toughness targets. When you consider that a 10-man swings 30 dice re-rolling when empowered, you're going to average 27 hits after the re-rolls. And then T5 to T7, you're now wounding on 4s, which is 13 wounds on average. And even if they have a 2-up save, that's 6 average failed saves, resulting in 12 total damage. They will put a lot of damage on things. If you understand where to send them and how to send them, they will punch up incredibly. But if you put them into the wrong target, you've just thrown them away. Into T8, you're averaging on 9 wounds because you're wounding on 5s. You won't wound anything on 6s unless it's at -1 to wound. But that means you're going to average 8 damage into a 2-up save, even at T8 or higher. So again, very good. The only things you don't want to really send them into are like Wraith Knights that have damage reduction. Anything that can get damage reduction, that's not a good target for these. You want to send these into things that you're going to put a lot of damage on, but they're not going to have an ability to reduce it. That is the prime target for it. How do I use them? Personally, my only raider in my list, which we've talked about, I only have one, is the party boat for Drazhar and friends. I don't break them up. Like, I don't take a 5-man and put them in a Venom. I take the 10. And there's a reason I take the 10. I take the 10 for efficiency of strats if I want to use a strat on them. But I don't think there's really much that makes them more killy. But also just for efficiency of dice. If I can send them at something and I can 9 times out of 10 guarantee that it goes away because I brought 10 Incubi, because of the role that they fill, that's much better than taking 5 and hoping that it goes away. Ain't no commitment like overcommitment is a very common expression in my play group. So I also I tend to hold them back until turn 3-ish, unless my opponent gives me something really spicy to hit, and we will look at that on a table in a minute. I tend to play my Drukhari in waves, and like I said, we're going to hop over to the table right now. So real quick, we're just going to assume this is our deployment zone for this interaction. Boop, boop, boop. And again, this isn't what's important. What's important, here's an objective, here's an objective, here's an objective. And again, this isn't what's important. What's important is that we understand what I'm talking about. So what's going to happen is most of the time my raider is going to sit back here, for example, or I might sit it like here. You know, it's going to be very dependent on what my opponent has and what they're doing. And I'm going to send my units out in waves rather than throwing everything every direction all at once, which we've talked about. I'm going to commit to one side. I might throw a unit out here depending on like my secondaries, but let's say I'm going to commit to this side here. I'll just throw one unit here. Grab that objective. Usually it's racks. Maybe it's a 5-mana Cabalites with splinter rifles. Something cheap that doesn't really fill a role. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put maybe Hellions here or something that can shoot, whatever. Something with some killing power there. And I'm just going to sit on this objective for as long as my opponent will let me. And then if they kill it with ranged, which if I've positioned right, they're not going to be able to, at least not without overcommitting. Because what I would do is I would try to put them here. So that in order to shoot them off, they're going to have to come around to see me. And they're going to have to put themselves in a position to get charged by something or to get shot by something. So I'm going to filter one cheap unit in, have them filter something out, and I'm going to kill it, right? If I can charge it, that's better. But if I have to shoot it, I will. So where my Incubi usually get played is I usually keep them back with the intent of striking the middle of the board. Because a lot of players will throw big, expensive things at the middle of the board. We've talked about Marine players ad nauseum and how every time I play against Marines, I know something is going to go here and just camp, and it's usually something big and expensive. So if I can, I might bounce this Raider up here if I know it's going to be safe, right? So turn one, I may put it right here just to kind of test out where my opponent's going to be. And then turn two, I might put it here if they have shown me that they're not going to commit much more. If I know it's not getting shot off the table there or even charged, and really if it gets charged, that's not the end of the world. Because if it dies in the fight phase, even if I lose 3 to 4 incubi getting out, they've still got a good counter charge. Then what I might do is turn three, if they've got something big and tanky in the middle of the board, like let's say it's a unit of Terminators, I'm going to send them into those Terminators. Now, I'm not going to send them without softening up the target first unless I know for a fact they can kill it. But I'm still going to send them into a unit of Terminators. Where I won't send them is obviously into Custodes. I won't charge a Custodes unit on an objective without shooting most of them off first. It's a bad idea. But like I said, it's one of those where turn three, I might send them here. And if I can get them right where this is, boop, 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 let's clean this up a little bit. If I can get them right here, and there's an objective here, I can also come this way. So it gives me two avenues of approach to two different objectives. And I'm pretty well protected unless they're very mobile. Obviously this doesn't work into every army because Grey Knights can teleport, GSC can teleport. Like you have some armies that are just more mobile than you are. But that's how I tend to use them is I send things in waves and I try to bait my opponent into committing somewhere where I can get them. So I might send like racks over here, something that's going to be a little bit harder to shift, or if I can hide them in this building here, which I think you can, I forget the measurements. But if I can hide them in the building and force them to have to commit to come take them out while I'm just scoring points, I will. The nice thing is that with a few exceptions, they're going to be able to punch up most of the time. And what I mean by that is if I'm playing orcs, obviously that's a little bit harder because they have a lot more throwaway units. And I want to try to shoot as many of those off the table. Because once I charge them, that's it. I'm going to either get stuck in or I'm going to get countercharged. And I cannot stand up to the countercharge at all. Orcs, GSC right now, I would rather play the shooting game with them than the melee game again, just because it tends to leave my ass out in the wind and a little bit harder for me to get hidden in position. I haven't gotten to play against Grey Knights yet, but with them being a bit more elite, I feel a lot more comfortable being able to charge them on objectives because once they die, they don't come back. Outside of that, like I said, I'm doing waves. So 5-man rack units, 5-man Cabalite units, send them out. Once my opponent commits, send something that can take care of it. If I get stuck in, it's fine depending on what we get stuck in with. But that's what we're talking about here is just one unit on an objective at a time, one unit on the objective at a time. Where I sometimes make mistakes is I sometimes play these guys like my orcs. And that's where the danger comes in. If you're having trouble, the first thing to check with your Drukhari is, are you overextending yourself? Because while we do have cheap throwaway units, we don't have a lot of units. So once you start losing them, things can come apart pretty quickly. So it's important to remember that. So one unit at a time to an objective, bait those charges, shoot them off, charge them off, whatever. And like I said, my incubi turn 3, turn 4, turn 5 is where they start to see action. If you're losing them turn 3, you're moving them up the board too quickly. You don't need to have them in combat. We can use them to dictate the flow of the game, which I've talked about. If my incubi are in this raider right here, and my opponent knows what they do, that could also shift what they do. And maybe they don't take the middle of the board. Maybe they're not as eager to get their cheeks clapped by my incubi. So what we can do is we can also use them in the raider as a deterrent, as a way to dictate the flow of the game. If they come towards the incubi and they kill the raider, obviously that's kind of a win for us if we're playing smart. If they go away from the incubi, if we've played smart, that's also a win. And then if they go to the middle, it's also a win. So again, if you've played really smartly, there's no scenario in which it's bad for you unless they've just got something that hard counters what you're doing. Like maybe they've got a bunch of indirect and then they come out here, they kill the raider and they use the indirect to smoke your incubi. The downside to that is there's nothing you can do about that. You just kind of have to grin, bear it, and move on with your life. But you don't need them on the table interacting in order for them to have an impact on the game. Them just being around will cause a shift in how your opponent plays, especially if they know what they do. And I've got a couple good examples of that. I played Custodes. He actually killed them before they got to interact because I failed a charge and a reroll, and it wasn't like a meaty one. It was just an 8-inch charge. With a reroll is generally pretty makeable, but I failed them both, and he killed them. He knew what they did because he's played against them before with me. And so he went out of his way to make sure they died. Like he pulled in real tight to them, shot them with everything he could shoot them with, and then still made sure to charge them just to make sure every last one of them was dead. So again, he knew what they could do, and it caused him to pull in really tight. And then I had 2 or 3 of his infantry units all in a group, and it allowed me to shoot them off the table. And then Lilith got to come in and play cleanup. And Lilith was amazing into Custodes, but we'll talk about that in the recap. Hopefully that little diagram helps. I know for me, just even the simplest of visual aids does. My takeaways are I think Incubi are solid, but they're not auto takes. They require a lot of precision and dedication. And really, a lot of the lists that I play for Drukhari do require precision. Like if I start to lose key pieces, things can unravel pretty quickly. So I need to be on my A game the whole game. I do think if you opt to take Incubi at a competitive level, you have to take Drazhar. If you're not playing in tournaments and comp games, obviously Drazhar is optional. In my opinion, you just commit whole hog. You take 10 Incubi and you take Drazhar, or you don't take any at all if you're playing in tournaments. Their points obviously could be spent on more Kabalites and transports. You can almost get a 10 man of Kabalites and a Venom for the same price as, well, you can definitely do it for Incubi and Drazhar, but you can almost do it with just the Incubi. So it's one of those where arguably you have better use for your points. I don't take them because they're broken. Like I said, this is just how I want to play the game. Like I said, they're very good into most targets as long as you understand how to use them. Don't charge anything that can damage reduce. Don't charge anything that can fight you first. You know, they're going to suck into things like Custodes because of their strat support. They could just free strat damage reduce. They can free strat fight first. So they're kind of a waste into Custodes, but that's where Lilith and Witches can kind of make that ground up. But they're very good into anything that doesn't damage reduce, especially with Drazhar. You can put a lot more damage on it on average than you would expect from just strength 4 neg 2 damage weapons. And like I said, I've never had a game where they haven't had an impact. And really, that Custodes game in the league was the first time they never saw combat. And it was one of those where I had already played him before. He knew what they did, and he was having none of it. So once I failed that charge, he saw the opening, he took it. But what ended up happening was I was able to exploit my mobility and shoot them off the table, which again, we'll cover more in the live recap that we're doing later. Now that we're done, I want to talk about some announcements. My league is almost done. We just finished round 3. I'm 2-1 with my only loss being to Gene Stealers. I'm probably going to end up hitting Custodes again next round. But now I've played literally in competitive like tournaments and leagues. I've played Custodes. 3 of my last 3 games have just been Custodes in a comp setting. And I think I'm slowly figuring out the secret sauce to them. GT at the end of August. What I'm going to do is I think I'm going to take a poll. I've been on the fence. I really want to play my orcs, but I also want to play my Drukhari. Like I'm on the fence. I haven't gotten to bust the boys out yet. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a poll. I'm going to let all you decide because I'm obviously going to be making video content based off of my interactions at the GT. Whatever it is you want to see as video content is going to dictate what I take. And that actually makes it easier for me because I will sit there and I will overthink it and I'll get decision paralysis and I'll go back and forth. But having community help by saying, hey, we want to see content on orcs or we want to see content on elves, it will help me just go, okay, this is a decision that is now much easier. So that's probably what's going to happen. Tampa Open is coming. I'm definitely playing Drukhari there, and that's mostly because I had already made that commitment when I signed up for it. I was like, I'm going to take my elves. This is what we're doing. My live round 3 recap is coming today or Thursday. I'm going to try to do it today. Today is Tuesday. For those that are watching this, I keep saying today, but maybe you're not watching it Tuesday. Today is Tuesday. Or I'm going to do it Thursday, which is going to be the 17th of August. I'm going to try to get it done today. We do have an AOS War Scroll video that's going to be incoming. It's going to explain how War Scrolls work and how to read them. And then we're going to see some more Kill Team how-tos coming. So if you don't know, I am an official GW judge, and I judge or organize for both Kill Team and Wh40k. So I have a lot of knowledge on both games. Obviously, I play a lot more Wh40k than Kill Team, although Kill Team has been a nice little break as I'm waiting for this data slate. Like, I still play Wh40k games, but it allows me to get some other games in while I wait for the data slate so I can see what's happening. Big shout out to my patrons, the Immortals, Captain Too Tall, The Real Donnie G, Lord Wellingstone, and Daniel Bodecker. Again, support's been phenomenal. You guys are amazing. Everybody's got their t-shirts and stickers, so that's awesome. And outside of that, I think that's going to do it. Links on the screen, links in the description. So the only link that'll be in the description today is probably going to be my Amazon affiliate link. Again, if you use Speed Paints and you are going to buy the box anyway, I would appreciate it if you just click the link and buy it through the link. I do get a kickback, and it's a great way for you to support the channel without having to spend any extra money. You're just doing things you would normally do, and it helps me. Thank you.